Hello and welcome to another installment of FIT Talks, the oral history program of the Fashion Institute of Technology, one of 64 campuses of the State University of New York. I'm James Ferguson, a Special Collections and College Archives Associate and Curator. We're coming to you today from the FIT campus on West 27th Street and 7th Avenue in Manhattan. It is April 9th, 2025, and the time is 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I have the privilege to be joined today by Kenneth D. King of the Fashion Design Department here and so many other illustrious accomplishments off campus.
Yes.
Kenneth, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And thank you for participating.
My pleasure.
So, for context, would you please just tell us a little about your childhood and upbringing?
Okay, I was born in Salina, Kansas in 1958. I'm that old. And my dad died when I was 10, so my mother remarried. We moved to Oklahoma when I was 13. And I remember the day we pulled the moving van up to the house, looking around and thinking, the first opportunity I have to get out of here, I'm gone. So fast forward a few years later, I got a job offer in San Francisco. I was, at the time, I was working in window display in Oklahoma City. My degree is in fashion merchandising, in specialization window display. And before I left Oklahoma, I was the display manager of the largest department store in Oklahoma City, which was the Dillard's in the Quail Springs Mall. Yes. So I moved to San Francisco in 81 and worked for this. He was my boss before. So I worked for him for about a year, then that job fizzled out, and I went to work for Macy's. So at Macy's, I worked for a man who was certifiably crazy. And, you know, the Devil Wears Prada is kind of false advertising because you think awful bosses, you'd be exasperated, but you'd want to work for them. He was not one of those. We hated him so intensely that we had a chance to kill him and make it look like an accident. And we almost did, and the only thing that stopped me was I believe in reincarnation. So I understood I really have to work for myself. So about this time, I was, this friend who got me the job in San Francisco had a friend, a rich lady, who wanted a Mother of the Bride dress for her daughter's wedding. So I made the dress and said to myself, I can make money with this sewing thing. And so I decided on accessories, because accessories don't have to fit. But right. I had a friend who was an accessories, she was an accessories buyer at iMagnin, which is a very fancy store in San Francisco. She said, do hats. This is 83, 84. She said, they're going to be important in the years to come. No one's doing them right now. You can make a name quickly, which I kind of liked. So I said, okay, I'm going to make hats. So being in window display, one of the things I understood is presentation. The hats, because I didn't want to make just one-off. I wanted to make one-off hats. I wanted to, make wildly expensive stuff. And so if you have a great product in a crummy package, you have a crummy product. So I built, because I knew my way around a hot glue gun, black velvet boxes lined in black taffeta. So each hat had its own case. There was, if it was a hat that couldn't rattle around, there was a styrofoam shape under the lining, and I would pin them down with large pearl-headed hat pins. And then there was the black tissue paper. So it was this, the sound of the lid lifting off and the crackle of the tissue paper and all. It was, it developed anticipation. So I met a gal who was a stylist in Los Angeles for an agency called Cloutier. She said, you need to be in Maxfield. I said, okay, you tell me, I'll tell you what I need to get for these pieces. You tack on a commission. If you can get me in, we'll do business. That's how I got into Maxfield in late 86. So from there, I quit my job in March of 87. The stock market crashed in October of 87. By December of 87, I lost my apartment, and I had to melt down all my jewelry to fill an order. I tell my students this, because, where I'm at now, you don't see any trace of that. And yes, the melting down the jewelry kind of hurt, because I needed to do it. I didn't have any cash, but I had jewelry. So I got through that, and I started selling to Maxfield. So in about 1990, I studied with a woman named Simone. And one of your questions was, who is a towering influence in your life? She was one of those. She trained at the École Guerlain in Paris as a premier for a couture house. So, like, Dior would hand her the sketch, Madame, make this, and she would make it. It was pattern making. So, of all my education, that is what I value the most highly, even more than my bachelor's degree. So, then I was asked to teach. And it was just one of those things. When you're self-employed, you want multiple revenue streams. And that's something I tell my students. If you have one job and you lose that job, you're up a creek. So someone wanted me to teach this class, and I thought, okay. And I looked at the number on the check when I got done and said, I think I'm going to be doing more of this. So that led to a sewing show on PBS called Sewing Today. It was 26 episodes. The host, Nancy Fleming, former Miss America 1961, and hand to God, her talent was sewing. You can see it on YouTube. Wow. Yes, and I understand why she was Miss America. She was charming. She taught me how to be on camera. She taught me how video works. So that 26 episodes, it was on 200 stations across the country, and it was the only time the New York station had a sewing show. So we're talking mid-90s. Mm-hmm. That led to my first book. That led to me traveling around the country and teaching. So that created a whole other area for me, because I make one-off couture.
Right.
And I don't know if you've been to my website, but it's complicated. Mm-hmm. And what I hate is when people say, well, if you could make something simple. If I could make something simple, do you think I'd be making this? So I understood that there was not going to be a ready-to-wear line. My teaching has been my ready-to-wear. So, I put a high price on my day rate for teaching. I've traveled in North America, Europe, and Asia to teach. That led to my first book. And so then kind of moving forward, I have work in museum collections and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Victoria and Albert in London, LA County Museum of Art. Yeah. So in the early 2000s, I realized I'd gone as far as I could go in San Francisco. So New York, it's where everything is. And it was crazy, the doll thing. Because, see, I learned how to sew by making doll clothes, Barbie clothes. My parents, when, we're talking 1959, 1960, I so wanted those. There was like the little catalog. Mm-hmm. I studied that catalog. I wanted all those clothes. They were never going to buy them for me, the boy child in Salina, Kansas. Mm-hmm. So I traded my toy gun and holster set to my younger sister, who was a tomboy, for her Barbie. That's how I got my Barbie. Barbie's name was Estelle. She lived in a big city. She drove a convertible. She had a cool apartment. She went to the opera, the theater, and restaurants, and she only owned evening clothes. Kind of what I wanted in my life. Yeah. So she, I started sewing with her. So getting to New York, it was kind of a weird thing. I got approached by this toy company in the Bay Area. They wanted me to make an evening outfit for an 11.5-inch fashion doll. Not Barbie. They had the doll. I never saw the face, but I had a body. She had a woman. It was a realistic looking body. She was very pretty. And so when I handed off the project, it was early February. The gal was coming to New York to go to the toy fair. She was also going to be looking for office space. And I had been sharing an apartment over in Tudor City in 2003, kind of going back and forth, trying to figure out how to make the move. So I said, I'm looking to move. This is where I'd like to land. This is roughly how much I can spend. If you see anything that looks like a candidate when you're out there, let me know. Friday the 13th of February. I got a message on my machine. I found your place. They're emailing you photos. And that's how I found my place here in Manhattan. And everything else, I made the leap.
Wow.
So that's that's how I got to New York. There's much more, but I'll let you ask some questions.
That's fantastic. Jumping back to your childhood, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't know, because I didn't know you could make money sewing.
Right.
I was always making things. If you read the foreword to the book, I talk about, because my being a sissy kid in that part of the country was not easy, and so I would hide out in my bedroom and make things, and primarily clothes for Estelle.
Right.
So, but it never occurred to me that I could make a career out of that. That was just when I got that Mother the Bride dress. That's when I realized, I can make money doing this. So I didn't really know.
Okay. And is there anything, you touched on a bit, but is there anything else you'd like to tell about your formal or informal education?
Well, the Central State University in Edmond, Oklahoma, it's called something else now, I can never remember. That was okay to get me in the game because I just wanted to tick the box bachelor's degree.
Right.
And this is something I tell my students, finish a degree. Just finish it. It tells people you finish something. But studying with Simone was a significant thing because she trained in a very rigorous program, and she trained me as she was trained. Now, if she liked you, you got more work, and she really liked me, so she piled on the work. Mm-hmm. I'm always reading. I'm always looking. I have friends who are sewing friends, and I think people who sew need to have other people who sew, just to kind of, if nothing else, show them, look at this cool thing I discovered. So it's an ongoing process because one cannot know everything.
Sure.
So yeah.
Nice. And you also spoke about some of your jobs. What was your first job?
My first job in Oklahoma City was doing drywall when I was 13. People think that's hilarious. They look at me now and they can't imagine that I know what the business end of a hammer is. But that was my first job. Then I worked dipping ice cream and working. Mm-hmm. The only job I got fired from was Wendy's Old Fashioned Hamburgers. And when I got fired from Wendy's Old Fashioned Hamburgers, that's when I got into retail, and that was my entree into window display. Because the guy who ran the store, it was a little tiny chain in the Midwest called C.R. Anthony's. It was where the red state shopped, Levi jeans and work shirts and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he said, get in there and do the windows, and that kind of got me going.
Wow. So would you say you decided on your careers, or did they decide on you?
I think they kind of decided on me. Because, I will be the first person to say I'm kind of lazy. So, the idea of working, I knew I had to, but it was just, I knew what I wanted to do, which was make things.
Right.
And window display was a good avenue because as a display person, you don't necessarily have to have a deep knowledge of a lot of things. You have to have a broad base of knowledge. And there are certain areas I have quite a deep knowledge of. Others, it's about that deep. But I can fake my way through it. Mm-hmm. And also, one of the things that it equipped me for in teaching, and especially here, there are a lot of people who teach here who have a very narrow silo of information because they've been in a particular slice of the industry. And I tell my students, I can get a dress on a runway in an hour. That requires a whole different set of techniques than I can make a piece that lives in a museum after 30 years of useful life. So there's a whole bandwidth of different ways to approach a particular construction thing. Mm-hmm. And I say to them, it's three factors. There's how much time do you have to make it, how long does it have to last, and how much money are they willing to spend. And that determines where on that spectrum you're going to put your efforts. So window display was good. There was a lot of variety. Mm-hmm. I got to work not just in fashion because, especially at Macy's, when you came into Macy's, you had to work in the home lines before you worked in fashion. And as much as I didn't like to do that, it made me do it, and actually made me pretty good at it. So, that's there you have it.
All right. Now, where in the chronology of all of the lives you've lived did FIT come up, and how did you come to work here?
Well, I knew Valerie Steele. When I was in San Francisco, I was on the board of the Textile Arts Council. It's a support group for the textile collections at the de Young Museum. Mm-hmm. I was their program chair. And when I was here in 2003, they were talking about someone had given them a big chunk of money to hire a big name speaker to come to talk on this certain date. So I just barged into her office one day and put on my Textile Arts Council hat, mm-hmm. and said, this is who I am, and this is the date, and this is what we'd like you to speak on. And she said, this is how much I charge. I said, that will be no problem. And so I got that all set up. And actually, it was April 17th, because that was the day I was moving into my apartment here. She was in San Francisco giving this talk that I had set up. And I told everyone on the board, you better take good care of her. Put her at the cliff, take her out for good meals, keep her watered and fed. And so when I got here, I invited her over to the studio. And so that was that. And a few weeks later, out of the blue, I got a phone call from the apparel design department. And they said, we hear you're in New York now. Because I have kind of a reputation. I've written for Threads magazine for 35 years. I can't believe it.
Wow.
And, you know, the nice thing about traveling and teaching is it's portable. So it wasn't location specific. And so they called and they said, would you like to come in and talk? So I brought a bunch of things and I went in and I just kind of hung everything up and did my little dog and pony show and said, okay, here's what I do. And that, because it never occurred to me. And I don't have, I think maybe she might have said something, I don't know for sure. Mm-hmm. But I mean, just getting a call like that out of the blue was, you know, it was nice. So that's how I came to work here.
That's fantastic. How would you say, how did your teaching work influence your design work and the books you've written, or how have they influenced your teaching?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. My aesthetics are all about technique. Mm-hmm. And so part of that is having to be a master of a technique. And so, and I show my students, because see, this jacket I'm wearing today is something I made. I just think it's fair to show them I do this still on the outside. Because FIT is a very tiny slice of my whole thing.
Sure.
And I say to them, if you know your craft, you will always have work. And so in different parts of my career, like we just wrapped it up because of what's going on politically, I was working for DARPA because they have figured out how to spin fibers that record audio. And so they were wanting me as kind of a consultant to come up with some designs that don't look like an engineer designed them. Mm-hmm. So my work, my couture work, uses some of the techniques, and also my couture work, I kind of go off into uncharted territory, and that particular thing I don't talk to my students about. I tell them, I've documented it, you know, when I'm gone to the big sewing room in the sky, you know, someone can come back and retrace my steps and figure out what I did. But with the techniques that I teach in the couture certificate programs, I tell them, you will have work. So, because if nothing, I'm nothing if not practical. You know, I want to be able to earn my livelihood doing this, and I have for a good long time. Mm-hmm. So, the traveling and teaching around the country, how that has affected teaching here, is when they're paying you bushel baskets full of money and flying you there and putting you up and all of that, and then you get to keep all that money, you damn sure better produce. Mm-hmm. And so I'm conscious all the time, very conscious that you're here to make sure that these people understand what you're teaching them. And so all efforts are bent towards that. You know, any handouts, the thing with COVID, I had to do videos, which actually have been a godsend, because now I send them the video, I send them the handout, it's like, okay, this is what we're doing next week, and then they come to class, and then I do the demonstrations. And so between the demonstrations and looking at the videos and the handouts, they understand it. Because really, when I'm traveling around the country, at the end of the class, they have to know how to do that, which has been very valuable here. I think some people lose sight of the idea that you're there to teach what you know to someone else. The other thing is, and people are always surprised by this, they say, well, you're telling all your secrets. Well, not really. I'm giving you a technique. A technique's a tool like a screwdriver. Mm-hmm. What you do with that technique is up to you. These are the things I do with these techniques. However, these are not the only things you can do with these techniques. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's, yeah.
That's great, yeah. Well, you've also briefly alluded to this, but is there anything more you'd like to say about a person who's had the most positive influence on your life?
Well, there were two. One I talk about, Simone. Mm-hmm. She, professionally, she's the one who completed my knowledge. And I tell my students, I can stand on her shoulders and see further because of her.
Right.
The other one, my mother had a lawyer when I was a teenager. Her second husband, that marriage didn't last long, and she made some questionable choices about men. And so there was the lawyer Harry. Harry looked like George Burns, the comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Harry was the voice of reason, and I remember the first time we had a conversation. Came out of his office, and I was in the waiting room waiting for her, and he went, "Come here." And I thought, "Oh, what have I done?" It's so bad that Harry has to talk to me because I wasn't a bad kid.
Right.
My mother had an easy. No drugs, no alcohol, no smoking. I mean, the only law breaking I engaged in when I was a teenager was driving cars before I was 16. Only got caught once by the guy's mother in her car, which was, yeah.
Oops.
So I was wondering, oh God, what on earth? So, I went in and she was looking at him. He said, "You get lost. I have something I have to talk to him about." So we were sitting there and he kind of leaned back and he looked at me and he said, "I've been watching you and you have a certain something in your eyes. And I want to have some conversations with you because you can either have a lot of fun with it or you can get in a lot of trouble with it." And I didn't really, at the time, totally get what he was saying. But then he said, "I know it sucks for you right now, but this is not forever. So what you need to do is you need to just make decent grades, don't get in any trouble, and one day you can leave all of this. Not now, but one day." And that was the life preserver. So there were other conversations we had. Like one time, my mother had this, she was dating this guy who bilked her for the college money. And I remember being in his office. I remember he looked at me and he said, lonely people can do foolish things, and your mother is a very lonely person, and your college money's gone. And for me, the takeaway was, lonely people do very foolish things. And so after I split up with my first husband, which was like back in '87, that was one of the things that was happening during all of the stock market crash, all that. It was,
wow.
I do a podcast too if you want to hear about it. But I was single until I met my husband, and that was 25 years, because lonely people do very foolish things. I've seen a lot of people do that. There were other selfish. That was another lesson. He said, if people say you're being selfish, what they're saying is you're not doing what I want you to do. He said, selfish is not a bad thing. It gets a bad PR, and you can take it too far, but a little bit selfish is a good thing. So he kept me from spinning off my axis during that time. Because, when I look back on it, it was the "it gets better" talk.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's great. What would you say, what book or film or doll or other work of art would you say has influenced you the most?
Oh, gosh. The little catalogs from the Barbie. Because you're probably too young for this, but they were like 3 inches square. With the doll or with the clothes, you got the little catalog. And I studied those. I wanted those so badly. And my parents were never going to buy me those. Mm-hmm. There was one particular one called Solo in the Spotlight. It was the black strapless number with fitted and his little ballerina tutu at the ankles and the long gloves. And there was a microphone and a chiffon scarf and a pearl necklace. And see, I always looked at those clothes, and I wasn't buying the Barbie as a teenage fashion model line, because those were grown-up lady clothes. Those were not little girl clothes. So that's why my Barbie, Estelle, was 27. She was a grown-up. And that particular, I loved that dress. I so thought that was the coolest thing on the planet. And there's a gown that is in the permanent collection of the LA County Museum of Art that kind of, if you kind of squint, you can see that one of the references was that Solo in the Spotlight, because it was glamorous. Mm-hmm. And I wanted glamour.
Nice.
I mean, it's not Proust. It's not deep thoughts, but it worked for me.
I mean, Proust is thinking along similar lines.
I tried reading Proust. I tried, and I finally gave up because I was not really good at diagramming sentences in English. Mm-hmm. And after, because there are sentences that go on for pages.
Yes.
And after about 60 pages in of trying to diagram, what is the subject of this sentence? What is the verb? I finally just said, okay, I give up. I used it for a doorstop for years.
Functional.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are your plans or dreams for the future?
Well, the immediate thing is getting this manuscript cranked out by the end of May. I have
Wow.
one, I have like 9.5 of the 10. So the little
Okay.
muslin I showed you, that's the
Mhm.
jacket for that, and then that'll be good. I'd like to get that done by the end of the week. End of May is when I have to have all of the photos for the story. Longer term, I have a screenplay that I've written.
Wow.
And, I tell everyone, because you just never know who knows someone. And it's based on, I wrote a novel some years ago, and it was autobiographical. And I started writing the novel because a friend of mine said, I was telling him something, and he just didn't believe me. I said, I don't have that good of an imagination. This is true. And so the novel starts out, the first sentence in the novel is, I had never kidnapped someone before. Because really, it starts with the kidnapping. Long story, I'll let you figure it out. There's also an audiobook on Audible called All Grown Up Now, Friendship in 3 Acts. So Act 3, where the kidnapping occurs, that's the screenplay.
Wow.
So, I do all sorts of things, but that's what I'd like to see produced.
Absolutely, yeah. What would you most like for people to remember about you?
That I knew my craft. And there's something I say to my students, and I can hear them rolling their eyes behind me. I say to them, there are two things. One, if you know your craft, you'll always have work. Sometimes it isn't work you talk about. I tell them about the 5 bridesmaids dresses in 7 hours for a friend who had appendicitis, and I had to pull that thing out of the fire. There were the little girls' spandex tap dancing costumes. Again, I say, it's not on your resume, but you cash the check. So if you know your craft, you'll always have work. The other thing, and I always am bringing in clothing when I'm teaching something. I have a good collection here of example garments. I bring things in that I've made and all, and I put them on the table, and I say to them, if I put it on the table, I mean for you to come over and pick it up and turn it around. Because what I say is, you learn about clothing by looking at clothing, not pictures of clothing on the internet. Mm-hmm. Because each garment tells a story. Last week we were making slot seams, and I brought this coat in, and I, showed it to them, and I said, okay, now let's look at the inside of this. And there was this interesting detail. It was this big bell sleeve, but there was a thing inside that had a cuff that would keep the wind from whistling. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, if you turn this inside out, you can see this here and see this here. This was shortened. It leaves, they leave traces. And at the hem, it's like, see this here? It's a mismatched hem tape. That means this was shortened. And, there are all sorts of things that a garment will tell you. How deep is that hem allowance? What are the seam finishes? Is this drop lining or a closed lining? And why would there be a difference? All of these things.
Yeah.
So, those are the things I would want them to remember me by.
All right. I feel like it would be rude to not
we can't
acknowledge your
ignore them.
entourage.
Yes.
Would you like to
Okay,
introduce them?
So this is Crazy Bella is in the fur. She's because it's cold out today.
Sure.
Yeah. So she had to get out her coat. And then this is Lola. They're in Doll Couture. This is Doll Couture, available from Abrams now. Yes, Lola, she was a showgirl. Mm-hmm. And we all, at the end of the story, she lost her youth and she lost her Tony. Now she's lost her mind. Well, in Doll Couture, she kind of gets back on track. And she amasses a group of friends, one of whom is Crazy Bella. And Crazy Bella had, during the pandemic, she was wanting to institute the tar beach. You go up on the roof and sunbathe. So then she was up on the roof, and she didn't think anyone could see her, and she took off her bathing suit. Well, these two guys across the way were taking pictures of her without her bathing suit. They sent ransom notes saying, send us $1 million, or we're sending them to the press. And since she is kind of a toast of the town, she kind of told them go to hell. That's a nice way of putting it. Mm-hmm. And they published. And there was this whole, and it was during the pandemic, and all my friends were saying, are you okay? I'm like, this is how I'm surviving. I don't do drugs or alcohol. I need something, so I'm making videos for school, and I'm doing the blackmail story. And so who knew it would turn into something?
Yeah.
I was sitting, this was in 22, the CEO of Taunton Press, and she follows me on Instagram. Now, and Lola's Instagram, Lola the Showgirl 24. So and if you go all the way back to the beginning, you can see the whole Crazy Bella story with the trial and they were convicted and they went to jail, and she had a triumphant tour to Fire Island, and she wrote her book, and then she met with Marley Blackwood of the Marley Blackwood Literary Agency, and if you see the photos, that's my husband with his back to the camera.
Okay, yes, I did.
And so she had a book launch, and she hired Lola as her assistant. So, it was all kind of a redemption story. So in the new book, which is coming out fall of 25, they're both coming back, and Bella's going to be the commentator on the red carpet for the new Broadway show, Yes, Yes, Babette. Lola will be making an appearance, and some of the other characters from the book. So that's why they're here today, because they like the publicity.
Oh, yeah. We picked that up about them. Finally, is there a question that I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough one. Nothing comes to mind.
Okay. Anything? Any parting thoughts? Anything
Parting
like
thoughts. I keep going back to that. If you know your craft, you'll always have work. And so the other thing I would say to, especially students watching this, don't just limit yourself to one kind of type of work. Experiment with other kinds of things. I will be the first to admit I'm better because in the couture there are the tailoring ateliers and there are the dressmaking ateliers. So I'm more of a tailoring. It's called a tailoring hand. I have a tailoring hand. I can make a good job of it for the slippery, slidey, sheer fabrics. I prefer not to, and so I will charge a lot of money. If I have someone who wants chiffon, I'm happy to do it, but I'm going to stick the price up really high because I know I'm going to earn every penny.
Right.
So, yeah, if you know your craft, and the other part of that I would say to students is don't sell yourself cheap. I tell my students I don't do anything for exposure. Because, I've had, you can see it on my website, but I have lots of rich and famous people. The big one is Elton John. And there was the Diet Coke commercial in the early 90s.
Yes.
That was my hat. That red hat was mine.
Okay.
In the video for You Gotta Love Someone, that's one of my hats. In the video for Sacrifice, it's a hat and a jacket. Now, he paid for every stitch. In 2017, John Lewis did that commercial where he starts by playing his piano, and he works backwards. About 30 seconds into...
John Legend?
Well, no, John Lewis. It's a retailer in the UK.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking.
And so Elton was. They did this thing with Elton, and about 30 seconds in, they take you. The camera kind of pans down a hallway, and they come up to the dressing table, and he's putting on his glasses. That's one of mine.
Nice.
And I finally now have a photo of it. So yeah, I tell my students he paid for every stitch. This idea of just, give it to me and I'll get some exposure. I don't do that. I value my work. And I tell my students, don't say, I'm just inexperienced. No, you charge. Because when I started out, I had a reputation for high prices. So no one kicks when I raise my prices.
Right.
And I say to them, you've got to pay for your education. You've got to make a decent living. So don't sell yourself short.
Excellent.
There you have it.
All right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.